At the edge of the scorched valley, 32-year-old Kavi stood alone, his robe fluttering in the bitter wind. The sky loomed dark, bruised with storm clouds that churned above the distant mountains. His eyes were fixed on the ruin where his village once stood, now a blackened grave. All that remained were fractured wooden beams and scorched stone, coated in ash. Kavi whispered a prayer, but the silence swallowed it whole. He had arrived too late. He gripped a small locket in his hand, a gift from his sister, now likely gone. Rain began to fall, mixing with the soot on his skin. He dropped to his knees, clutching the earth as memories surged, his sister laughing by the river, his mother blessing his journey. Kavi's breath shook. The fire had spared no one. In that moment, the world seemed unreal, a cruel illusion mocking him with emptiness. He screamed into the storm, but even his grief felt hollow. Then, in the rubble, a faint shimmer caught his eye, a shard of crystal, pulsing faintly beneath the ash. He stared at it, entranced. Something stirred deep within him, a whisper he couldn't explain. That single glint of light cracked open a question that would change everything. Was this destruction an end, or a beginning? The crystal's light pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and alive. Kavi's hand hovered above it, unsure. Something about it felt ancient, not just in age, but in wisdom. As he touched it, a warmth spread up his arm, comforting, not dangerous. His pain quieted. For a moment, the grief did not vanish, but became lighter, as if shared. A whisper echoed through his mind, not in words, but in feeling. "You are not alone." He staggered back, clutching the shard. Around him the ruin looked different, still broken, but less empty. He scanned the valley and noticed the wind had calmed. Even the sky, still bruised, seemed to hold its breath. "What are you?" Kavi whispered, holding the shard close to his chest. It pulsed again, slower now, almost like it was listening. The silence returned, but it was no longer hollow. It was patient. Somewhere deep inside, something had shifted. Kavi did not understand it, but he knew he could no longer walk the path he had before. Kavi moved through the wreckage with slow steps, the crystal now glowing faintly in his pocket. Each charred board, each collapsed roof seemed to speak of lives paused in mid-breath. He passed his childhood home, now a hollow shell. His eyes lingered on a broken water urn and the remnants of his mother's old prayer flags fluttering weakly. Guilt wrapped around him like a chain. Why had he left? Had his quest for answers led to abandonment? The wind carried the scent of wet ash, and something else, jasmine. He followed it and found the collapsed temple. Its stone guardian lions cracked and moss-covered, but inside, a single unburnt lotus sat in a bowl. Kavi knelt again. The shard pulsed as he did. He didn't know if it was coincidence or message, but he bowed his head. "Forgive me," he said softly. In the silence there was no reply. And yet, something inside began to breathe again. The path to the temple was half buried in soot, but Kavi followed instinct. The closer he came, the clearer his mind became, as though the crystal filtered his grief. Inside he stood before the lotus and felt unworthy. Yet he did not turn away. He placed the crystal beside the flower. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then, a single drop of water fell from the broken roof and landed on the lotus. The petals shifted, opening slowly. Light rose from the center, soft and golden. It danced over the walls like sunlight through trees. Kavi watched, speechless. The crystal hummed in response. Not loud but present. This place still held something sacred. Maybe the gods had not abandoned them. Maybe destruction was not the end. He didn't understand how, but he knew the path forward would begin here, not in revenge or despair, but reverence. The past was ashes, but the present stirred with breath. Kavi emerged from the ruins with different eyes. The wind no longer howled, it whispered. Every sound seemed deeper. He turned once more toward the valley. Though destruction lay before him, a path now shimmered faintly ahead, visible only to him. The shard in his hand felt like more than a relic, it was a key. not just to knowledge but to healing. The rain had stopped. The air was still. A white bird flew overhead, wings outstretched, cutting across the sky like a silent promise. Kavi watched it disappear behind the clouds, then took his first step forward. Not back to the life he knew, but towards something unknown. The past would never return, but something inside him had awakened. He didn't know what the crystal truly was, or why it had chosen him. But he was no longer waiting to be saved. He would walk the path, even if he walked it alone. Kavi walked along the ancient trail that twisted through the forest's edge, each step muffled by damp earth and fallen leaves. The shard pulsed faintly in his pouch, a silent companion. Around him trees loomed tall like silent witnesses to forgotten truths. Though the storm had passed, the sky remained overcast, casting a silvery gloom through the tangled branches. Every sound felt exaggerated, the rustle of leaves, the snap of a twig, the distant cry of unseen birds. Kavi's senses were heightened, as if the world had grown louder in the absence of noise. He paused at a broken stone marker, half swallowed by moss. It bore a symbol, 2 spirals entwined. He traced it with his fingers. Something about it stirred a memory he couldn't place. "This is not just a road," he muttered. "It's a memory." The crystal glowed in response, subtle but firm. He stepped off the main path toward a narrow deer trail, pulled by something beyond logic. He wasn't lost. He was being led. The forest thickened, and Kavi's pace slowed. The trail narrowed to a thin line of pressed earth beneath curling roots. Shafts of pale light pierced the canopy, catching on dust and floating pollen. He felt the presence of the place, watchful, neither hostile nor welcoming. It was as if the forest remembered. A ring opened, and in its center stood a shrine made of stacked stones, half collapsed, vines wrapped around its base. Atop it lay a bowl filled with black sand and a single feather. Kavi approached with reverence, feeling the pulse of the crystal grow warmer. He knelt beside the bowl, gently brushing the sand aside with 2 fingers. Beneath it lay another spiral symbol, identical to the one on the marker. "What do you want me to see?" he whispered. The forest stirred with a gust of wind. Leaves spiraled upward, caught in an unseen dance. Something unseen was listening. He was sure of it now. As Kavi stood to leave the clearing, the world trembled, not with force but with meaning. From the trees emerged an old man, robed in layered greens and browns, as though carved from the forest itself. His eyes were deep-set, unreadable, but kind. Kavi instinctively stepped back. The old man raised a hand in peace. "You carry the breath of the old city," he said in a voice like dry leaves. Kavi's heart pounded. "What city?" he asked. The man motioned for him to sit. They settled near the shrine, and the man spoke of a place hidden beyond the edge of memory, a city born from light and buried beneath illusion. "Only those broken open can find it," he said, touching Kavi's chest. The crystal pulsed as if in agreement. "You were chosen because you lost everything. Now you must learn why." Kavi's silence stretched long. He knew his path had just changed. Again. They spoke for hours beneath the watchful trees. The old man, who called himself Jalen, shared tales not taught in temples, of the crystal bridge that linked realms of spirit and memory, and the lost city guarded by illusions of self. Kavi listened, torn between awe and disbelief. "The path is not walked with feet," Jalen said. "It is walked by letting go." Kavi clenched his fists. "How do I let go of ashes?" he asked. Jalen smiled gently. "You don't. You honor them, then let the wind carry them." Kavi felt his throat tighten. The elder handed him a pouch of herbs. "For dreams," he said. "They will guide you." That night, Kavi rested by the shrine, the crystal cradled in his palm. As sleep took him, a whisper echoed, "To see clearly you must become the stillness." His last thought before drifting off was not of grief, but of curiosity. The journey inward had begun. In his dream, Kavi stood before a bridge of crystal suspended in mist, stretching into a sky that held no stars, only shifting patterns of memory. The bridge pulsed beneath his bare feet, alive with echoes. As he walked, visions surrounded him. He saw himself as a boy, laughing with his sister. He saw his mother praying with folded hands. Then darker things, his anger, his failures, moments he had buried deep. The bridge trembled. He knelt and touched it, and the visions faded into a single image. His village, whole again, surrounded by golden light. A voice whispered, "The past is not a prison." When he awoke, the forest was still. The fire had gone out, but the crystal still glowed. Jalen watched him with quiet eyes. "You saw the threshold," he said. "Now you must choose to cross it." Kavi nodded. He felt the weight of grief, but also a sliver of light growing behind it. The forest opened into a vast marshland, where fog clung to the earth like memory to pain. Kavi stepped carefully, the ground soft and treacherous beneath his feet. Every reflection in the still pools looked slightly off, as if watching him. Jalen had gone, leaving only silence and the pulse of the crystal. The wind here did not whisper. It judged. Kavi tried to focus, but his thoughts grew heavy, filled with blame and regret. Each step stirred echoes of his failures. He saw shadows form in the fog, shapes familiar but twisted. His father's face, cold and disappointed. His own voice screaming in rage. He stumbled. The ground gave way beneath him, and he sank into a shallow pit. Struggling to rise, he gasped, the weight of the past holding his chest down. "Let go," a voice hissed, not his own, yet deeply known. Kavi clawed his way out, soaked in mud and memory. The shadows waited. Kavi wandered deeper into the mire, the crystal now dim and unresponsive. He felt stripped bare, exposed to things he had tried hard to forget. A child's laughter echoed through the fog, his own, distant and distorted. He turned sharply, but saw no one. The laughter turned to weeping. Then, silence. Suddenly, a figure stood before him, identical to Kavi but dressed in dark robes, his eyes hollow. "You ran," the figure said. Kavi stepped back. "You left them," it whispered. "You sought truth, but only found emptiness." Kavi gritted his teeth. "I didn't know. You didn't want to know." The words stabbed deeper than any blade. The reflection raised its hand. "Face me." Kavi stepped forward. The fog trembled around them. The moment stretched taut. He knew now. He wasn't here to escape. He was here to confront. And maybe, finally, to forgive. Kavi stared into the eyes of his shadow and felt the pull to run, but did not. "You are me," he said, voice low. "But not all of me." The reflection's lips curled in a bitter smile. "I am what you hide." Kavi took a breath, shaky but deep. "Then I will see you." The fog swirled violently. The shadow lunged, but not to harm. It merged with him. Kavi's knees buckled as memory poured through him. Anger, guilt, moments of pride twisted into shame. But as the pain surged, so did understanding. He saw the pattern, the story he had been telling himself. "I failed them," he whispered. "But I'm still here." The crystal warmed against his chest. A gentle light seeped from his skin. The shadow faded, not in defeat but in union. Kavi knelt, exhausted but lighter. For the first time, he truly felt whole, not perfect, but seen. The fog began to lift. Not all at once, but in slow waves, like curtains being drawn. Kavi rose to his feet, the marsh beneath him firmer, the air lighter. He walked with new steadiness. Every step no longer echoed doubt. A small hill emerged from the mist, crowned by twisted trees and old stone pillars, broken but still standing. At the center was a reflective pool, unmoved by wind. Kavi approached and gazed into it, not to find a path, but to see himself. His reflection was clear, whole. The light in the crystal pulsed with calm steadiness. "To move forward, you must see what you carry," he whispered. He closed his eyes and bowed. This was not the end of grief, but the beginning of wisdom. The forest beyond stirred with gentle motion. Something new waited. And Kavi, for the first time, felt ready to meet it. As Kavi turned from the pool, the land seemed to breathe with him. The birds returned to the trees. Sunlight cracked through the clouds in golden shards. A narrow trail shimmered in the distance, carved into the stone like it had been waiting. Kavi walked toward it, one step at a time. His mind still held sorrow, but not shame. The crystal was quiet now, as if at peace. Every breath felt earned. As he reached the start of the trail, he looked back once, not to mourn, but to honor. "Thank you," he said to the shadows behind him. Then he stepped forward. The air was different ahead, lighter, drier, as if mountains awaited. He didn't know what the lost city would hold or whether it was real, but he did know the next part of the journey would not be to find something outside, but to remember something within. The trail wound sharply upward, etched into craggy stone like a scar. Kavi climbed steadily, breath tight, feet sore, each step echoing with a purpose he couldn't yet name. The forest had faded behind him, replaced by barren cliffs and screeching wind. The path narrowed along a ridge that sliced across the mountainside. Far below, mist coiled like sleeping serpents. As Kavi climbed higher, he saw a carved gateway ahead, stone arches wrapped in faded cloth, inscribed with glyphs older than speech. He stopped before it. Something ancient pulsed through the air. The crystal warmed faintly, as if reluctant. Kavi stepped through. The air shifted instantly. It smelled of smoke and memory. What lay beyond was not a mountaintop, but a cavern mouth draped in shadow. A symbol etched above it mirrored the shard spiral. His breath caught. He wasn't just climbing higher, he was going deeper. Into the mountain. Into himself. Inside the mountain, silence reigned. Kavi's footsteps echoed against cold stone. The walls pulsed faintly with bioluminescent veins, casting eerie blue light. The air was dry, heavy with ancient breath. As he moved forward, murals emerged, stories etched in mineral and shadow. One showed a figure resembling him, cradling a crystal, standing above a city of light. Another showed fire devouring the same city. The final mural showed the figure alone, kneeling, while shadows rose behind him. Kavi reached out, fingers grazing the wall. "This is my story," he whispered. He wasn't imagining things. He had been here before, or something had. As he turned a corner, he found a raised dais with a mirrored surface. As he approached, it shimmered, not with his reflection, but with visions of destruction. His village. His people. His own face, filled with rage. "No," he muttered. But the truth didn't flinch. Kavi stared into the mirrored dais. The vision shifted. Now it showed a memory. He saw himself leaving his village, not in peace, but in fury. He had argued, cursed, rejected their prayers. He'd called the elders cowards for fearing change. He had left in anger. His fists clenched. "That wasn't who I am," he whispered. But the crystal flared hot. "It was," something inside replied. His knees buckled. Guilt surged. He thought he had left to seek wisdom, but maybe he had only run. "Did I cause this?" he asked aloud. The mirrored dais showed the fire spreading, unstoppable. He saw flashes of his sister trying to hold others back, calling his name. He wept, not just from loss, but from realization. His journey hadn't begun with tragedy. It had begun with ego. The mountain held no judgment, only truth. He had finally met the part of himself he had refused to see. The chamber shifted. The mirrored surface dimmed. The crystal no longer glowed, it burned. Kavi ripped it from his robe and held it out, palms trembling. "What do you want from me?" he shouted into the cavern. The silence replied with presence. Light burst from the crystal, illuminating the entire chamber. Shapes formed, figures of his village, his family, their final moments etched in flame and silence. Then, a single figure stepped forward. His sister. She didn't speak. She only looked at him with eyes full of love and sorrow. Kavi broke. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. I failed you. Her image stepped closer, placed a phantom hand on his chest. Warmth bloomed. The crystal grew still, no longer burning. He fell into silence. The figures faded, but the feeling did not. Forgiveness not granted, but offered. He bowed, not to the crystal, but to what it revealed. I see now, he whispered, and I will not turn away again. Kavi emerged from the cave just as the sun began to rise. The first light of dawn painted the mountains in molten gold. His robe was torn, his face streaked with dried tears and soot, but his posture had changed. He no longer looked behind him. He stood taller, grounded. The crystal now hung quietly from a cord around his neck, dim and warm. Not a beacon, a reminder. Ahead lay a narrow bridge, arched and crystalline, spanning a deep chasm. It shimmered faintly in the new light. He stepped toward it, not hesitantly, but with reverence. Each step echoed not with fear, but choice. He had faced his past, not erased it, not defeated it, but seen it and accepted it. This was no longer just a journey through lands unknown. It was a return to truth, to humility, and to something sacred. The crystal bridge awaited. And this time, Kavi walked with his whole self. Kavi stepped onto the crystal bridge, its surface cool and impossibly smooth beneath his feet. Each step rang out like a note in a silent melody. Beneath him stretched an endless void, swirling with pale mist and shifting patterns that resembled stars and memories. The bridge did not sway, but his heart did. Midway across, the mist surged upward. From it emerged forms, familiar, haunting. His sister, his mother, the elders, all reaching out, their voices soft and pleading. Stay, they whispered. You can rest here. Kavi froze. Their faces were filled with warmth, but their eyes shimmered unnaturally. He closed his eyes. You are not them, he said quietly. The forms blinked. You want peace, they cooed. You deserve it. But peace without truth was illusion. He opened his eyes and walked forward, through them. They dissolved into ash and vanished into the chasm. The bridge pulsed beneath his feet. He had chosen. Beyond the bridge, Kavi found himself in a circular courtyard carved into the stone. It was quiet, almost sacred. At the center stood a crystalline obelisk, humming with low energy. He approached it and placed the shard against its base. The ground trembled. Light flared. The obelisk dissolved into sand, revealing a descending spiral stair. He hesitated, then began the descent. With each step, he shed something: pride, fear, doubt. The air grew warmer. Torches lining the path, ignited without touch. The walls shifted, now showing moments from his life not just as memories, but as choices. He saw where he had chosen silence instead of apology, pride instead of humility, fear instead of love. But I am more than my worst choices, he whispered. He whispered. The stairs ended at a simple wooden door. He reached for the handle, breath steady. He had never felt lighter. The door opened into a chamber unlike any other. It was not a temple, nor a ruin, but a circle of mirrors. Each mirror reflected a different version of Kavi, joyful, angry, grieving, proud. He turned slowly, absorbing each fragment. Then the mirrors began to crack, one by one. You are not these, a voice echoed, not external, but within. You are not the mask of emotion, or the sum of your moments. The final mirror shattered, and the shards floated upward, forming a sphere of soft light. Kavi stepped forward. The light entered him, not as a force, but as a homecoming. It didn't blind. It soothed. You do not need to become, the voice said. You need only be. The light faded. The chamber was now empty, but he did not feel alone. For the first time there was no search, only stillness. And in that stillness, peace. When Kavi stepped out of the chamber, the air smelled of blossoms. The city had appeared, not grand or golden, but simple and radiant. Built from stone and light, It rested in harmony with the cliffs and trees around it. There were no gates, only an open path. People walked slowly, purposefully, calm, present. No one noticed him as extraordinary. He was simply part of the flow. A child offered him water. An elder smiled without words. Kavi bowed gently in return. He did not ask questions. He didn't need answers. The city wasn't lost. It was revealed. Only to those who had surrendered enough to see clearly. It had always been here, beneath illusion, beneath self. He stepped into its heart, not as a hero or seeker, but as one of many. He had crossed the bridge. He had passed the trial. And now, he had arrived. Kavi sat by a quiet stream flowing through the city, the crystal now resting beside him like a stone returned to the earth. He watched the water ripple, the way it held the sky without grasping it. He smiled, not with joy, but with contentment. Jalen appeared beside him, silent. No words were needed. They sat in stillness, the city breathing around them. For the first time, Kavi did not feel the need to move. "You are not lost," the silence said. "You are home." He touched the water, feeling its cool clarity. The journey was not over, but it was no longer driven by seeking. It was simply living. The crystal no longer pulsed. It had fulfilled its purpose. It was never about power or magic or destiny. It was about returning to truth, to presence, to the self that needs nothing and is everything. Morning came soft and silent in the lost city. Kavi awoke to the sound of wind brushing through trees and distant bells echoing from the mountainside. He didn't reach for the crystal. It lay beside him, inert, now part of the landscape. He stood and walked barefoot along the city's winding paths, observing how each person moved with intention, gathering water, tending gardens, sharing food without urgency or chatter. This was a place not of isolation, but integration. No one sought more than the moment. Kavi passed an open-air temple where 3 children sat in silence, eyes closed. A teacher did not speak, only watched. He sat nearby and closed his eyes too. No instructions. No breath counts. Just quiet. Within it, he felt the ache of his past still present, but no longer consuming. It had softened, become a part of him, not a weight. He did not need to escape it. He needed only to be still enough to carry it gently. Later that day, Kavi helped an elder carry bundles of herbs from the cliff's edge. They did not speak. But when they reached a shaded terrace, the elder offered him a bowl of water and motioned to sit. Kavi did. The elder picked up a smooth black stone and set it in the center of the terrace. "We place a stone for each burden we've accepted," he said softly. "Not to remember pain, but to honor the carrying." Kavi looked down. "Then, I have many stones to place." The elder smiled. "Yes, that means you are alive." Kavi reached into the folds of his robe and placed a small stone beside the elder's. He didn't name it. He didn't need to. They sat in quiet again. The city continued around them, laughter in the distance, the sound of cloth flapping in wind. Kavi did not feel separate from it. He was part of its breath. As dusk approached, Kavi walked to the edge of the city where the cliffs dropped into clouds. A small platform jutted out, used by residents to release offerings into the wind. Today he carried none. Just himself. He stood there for long minutes, breathing. Below, endless sky. Behind, a city that asked nothing of him. He took a folded piece of cloth from his robe, his sister's prayer scarf, miraculously preserved. He let it unfurl slowly, fingers trembling. Then, without words, he opened his hands. The scarf lifted on the wind, caught the fading light, and vanished into cloud. Kavi did not cry. Instead, he bowed his head and whispered, "Thank you." He stayed until stars appeared. One by one, not all at once. Each light was quiet, unhurried, like grace. He walked back with no weight in his steps. The world had not changed. He had. That night, Kavi sat by the community fire. No one spoke unless they had something to offer. One woman sang softly about rivers. A young boy carved patterns into bark. Kavi added no words. He simply listened. Around the circle, light flickered across faces not marked by suffering, but deepened by it. There was no need to share stories here. The silence told them all. Kavi thought of his younger self. Ambitious, furious, desperate to be seen. That self still lived within him, but no longer ruled. Now, there was space. A place for the many versions of him to rest together. He touched the crystal on his chest. It was cool. It no longer pulsed with instruction. It was a companion now. A reminder that truth is not given. It is lived. He looked around the fire and saw himself in every face. Not his image, but his essence. The search was over. The living had begun. Kavi rose before dawn. Alone he climbed the eastern path to a lookout point above the city. There, he sat in lotus posture, facing the horizon. No destination in mind. No teaching left to chase. Only breath. Only presence. As the sun rose, he did not close his eyes. He watched it all. The slow ascent of light, the changing sky, the way clouds thinned like thoughts dissolving. The silence around him was not empty. It was alive. He touched the ground beneath him and felt it pulse. Not with magic, with life. From the city behind to the winds above to the soil below, he was part of it. The past did not fade. It flowed. The future did not threaten. It waited. Kavi smiled, not with certainty, but with stillness. "I am here," he whispered. And for the first time, those words did not mean arrival. They meant home. The city stirred gently in the early light, its people waking not with alarms, but with the rhythm of breath and nature. Kavi walked among them, no longer a stranger, nor a seeker. A boy tugged his sleeve and offered him fruit without a word. Kavi bowed in thanks. He didn't speak much now. Words had become offerings, not tools. He stopped at the garden terraces where water flowed in narrow channels carved from stone. A woman sang softly as she guided water toward a thirsty vine. Kavi watched, mesmerized. The work was quiet, sacred. It wasn't the planting or the harvest that mattered, but the tending. He touched the soil and felt warmth. In the garden he was not needed. And yet his presence mattered. As he rose, a breeze moved through the vines and scattered small blossoms into the air. He didn't try to catch them. He simply let them pass. Later, Kavi sat by a stream outside the city's edge, watching a group of children float hand-carved boats down the current. Their laughter echoed gently, not loud, but bright. One child approached and placed a small wooden boat beside him. "For you," she said. Kavi smiled and pushed it into the water. The boat wobbled, then caught the flow and sailed forward. He watched it disappear around a bend. "All things move," he whispered. "All things pass." But there was no sorrow in that thought, only truth. He leaned back, the grass beneath him cool and damp. In the stillness he felt something he had not known for years. Joy. Not loud or wild. Just the quiet joy of breath, of presence. A dragonfly landed on his knee and stayed a moment. He did not flinch. He watched it shimmer. When it flew away, he whispered, "Thank you," and meant it. That evening, the city gathered for the turning, an old tradition marking the end of one moon and the rise of another. No ceremony, no speeches, just stillness. Residents carried lanterns to the cliffs and set them gently into the air. Each flame rose slowly, hundreds of lights against a darkening sky. Kavi stood among them, his own lantern in hand. He did not make a wish. He did not seek blessing. He simply watched the light rise, then let go. The lantern lifted, soft and steady, until it disappeared into the velvet blue. Around him, silence reigned, not empty, but full of reverence. The lanterns were not about memory. They were about release. As the last one vanished, Kavi closed his eyes. He did not cry. He did not smile. He simply breathed. He was not better. He was not worse. He simply was. Before dawn, Kavi returned to the bridge. The same one he had crossed, now quiet and pale in the moon's soft glow. He stood at the center, not to test himself, but to reflect. He looked into the void below, no longer fearing what stared back. The mist did not whisper now. It held him. Across the span, nothing called to him. And that was the gift. He sat down at the center of the bridge, legs folded, eyes open. Breath moved through him without effort. Behind him lay the path. Ahead lay more path. But for now, only this. He heard a bird call. A leaf fall. A breath pause. Time did not matter here. Identity did not matter here. The crystal at his chest was still. He placed it beside him and whispered, "You brought me here. Now I walk alone." And he smiled, not with joy, but with freedom. As the first light of morning broke, Kavi stood once more. The bridge beneath him glowed faintly, not with power, but with peace. He did not look back. He did not look ahead. He simply walked. Each step light, deep. Each breath full. The world awaited, no longer as a test, but as a companion. The city would remain. The pain would remain. The truth would remain. But he would meet them not as one who seeks, but as one who sees. A final breeze moved across the bridge, lifting dust, memory, silence. Kavi turned his face toward the sun, eyes open. The final words whispered across the wind were his own. There is no end. There is no beginning. Only the path. And with that, he disappeared into the rising light, whole, present, and free.